Welcome to another episode of Fight the Burnout. Today we have AK Dozanti from the US. She is a ex-police officer of 12 years and now doing similar things to what I do around wellness and coaching for law enforcement and first responders, well-being coaching specifically. And so we're going to have some fun today talking about some similar things. I can already tell. We've had a conversation before we started recording, and there's some good stuff. As always, this episode is sponsored by Create From Why. And we currently have a motorcycle retreat for first responders, business professionals, and all proceeds are going to a law enforcement based company called Griffith Blue Heart, who gets AEDs into the back of police cars so that they can save even more lives. There you go. And so we are doing that in May 2023. So if you're interested in that, the link is down in the bio. But without further ado, AK, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background in policing, and we'll talk burnout and wellness today.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. I can tell this is going to be a great conversation. So, yeah, a little bit about me. I started in law enforcement when I was just 19 years old as an auxiliary. I did a couple years of undercover online investigations. During that time, I was getting my undergrad degree and went through the academy when I was 20, which for the state of Ohio, you can't actually be commissioned until you're 21. But so I had a little bit of time to wait. But went ahead and got my degree, started as a deputy sheriff 2 days after I graduated, and was full time on there for a while. In 2015, I had a very crispy burnout. I didn't know that when I came into the job, I had traumas that I had not dealt with, had not healed from, and as many of us later find out, that's kind of what drives us getting into the job. But at that point, I pivoted and I became a criminal court victim advocate for about 5 years. During that time, because I couldn't just slow down and be focused on one thing. I went back and got my master's degree in criminology and victimology, which is essentially trauma. And I became a yoga instructor. I went really woo woo for a while. I became a Reiki master, got into all the essential oils, all of the healing modalities. And when I left that job in 2020, I took some time off just to be a mom and a wife. And well, pandemic in there with that. But um, I kind of did some soul searching, tried to figure out where on earth I wanted to go with this. I was still on as an auxiliary, and I just decided that I needed to mesh all of it together, and so I did. And I created Lifesaver Wellness. And I coach and train first responders on their own personal wellness and how to manage chronic stress and mitigate the byproducts of working in a trauma-rich environment.
Mm, and we all need that, definitely. And if you're sitting there going, "Hey, I don't need that," well, you definitely need it. I'm just gonna put it out there. So okay, cool. So let's go back to what got you into wanting to go into law enforcement in the first place.
Interestingly enough, I always say that it kind of chose me. When I look back at my childhood, I was always into, and I don't know if you'll remember this, but Harriet the Spy. I was always into like unsolved mysteries and like these, different shows, and it was all very intriguing. And so I really loved the investigation side of things, right? Being a spy. I just thought that was like the coolest thing in the world. But I obviously didn't really think that was gonna be the case. So uh, when I went to college, I really enjoyed sociology and the study of social sciences and things like that. Um, I was in a class and they offered an opportunity to go shadow the folks that I ended up working undercover with. Um, and I absolutely fell in love with it. And as messed up as it was, I knew that I was helping because I was catching pervs online is what I was doing. And so, but I knew that if they were interacting with me, then they weren't interacting with a real 14-year-old girl. And so that was what kept driving me to go back there. And so then I just signed, I was like, the only way to do this is to actually become a cop. And so I signed up for the police academy. My family was all like up in arms, like, what are you thinking? What are you doing? Um, and it just blossomed from there.
Oh, that's awesome. We interviewed a few episodes ago a guy who did that for like the that investigation online stuff for a long time, and he called himself a 14-year-old girl all the time. He's like, yeah, I was a 14-year-old girl online, all
Yeah.
to catch pervs. And I was like, yeah, cool. And that's the title of it. 14 being a 14-year-old girl to catch pervs. And so it's quite funny. But yeah,
Yeah.
so and I know he went through a lot during that time with his stuff. He had kids and that, but how'd you deal with that undercover stuff online and that? How'd you find that?
Uh, what do you mean?
Like
How did
how
I
did you
find
find
it?
it
Or,
personally, like mentally wise in that? Did it did
oh, how
I
did
know
it
you were
affect me?
young,
Yeah.
you're
It,
quite young, but
yeah. And I think being so young, um, looking back, it affected me more than I thought it did,
yeah.
because I wasn't that much older than the people who I was pretending to be, right? And the things that I was being exposed to were far beyond, what I could have ever imagined reality in the criminal side of things. Um, and at that point, it, I was so eager to learn more and to keep learning and doing good that I didn't even consider how it was affecting me.
Hmm.
But looking back, there are still images that are stuck in my head.
Yeah.
And there are still conversations, I would do controlled phone calls and stuff. Some of those conversations are still stuck in my head. And I just, at that point, you're so young, you don't even have the awareness to notice how those things do affect you. So, um, at the time, I didn't find it to bother me very much, but in hindsight, it definitely had an impact.
Looking back on it, because I'm all about, prevention, I know you are as well. Looking back on it, what were you so focused on that it didn't really so much affect you at the time, or feel like it didn't affect you at the time? What were you focused on, like specifically? Can you remember?
Um, I just wanted to catch as many of them as possible.
Hmm.
I was so focused on if they're talking to me, like, so if I had four conversations going on at once, I was like, okay, that's four people that are not talking to a real 14-year-old girl. That's four people that we could potentially get off these streets. And it just, it was, it was really late nights and, multiple nights in a row because you had to continue these conversations and keep them going. And it just kept driving me to get more and more and more and more and more. And I remember the record at the time, and I don't know if anybody's beat it, but from the time that the person said hello to the time we had him in handcuffs, was my record of 44 minutes.
Whoa.
44 minutes. And he had a 30-minute drive. And I was like, this is absolutely insane. So I just wanted to keep catching those guys.
Did you find that, because I know like some people can get burned out doing that, and sometimes if you're focused on the right things, it actually empowers you and actually energizes you in a positive way. Did
Mhm.
you find that it energized you through that time? Like, did you feel drained, or did you feel like it was serving you?
Oh, well, it was such an adrenaline rush that I think I got addicted to the rush of it all.
Yeah.
Um, because I was brand new. I wasn't even able to be commissioned at the time. I was only 19 and 20. Um, and so to be so valuable to them as a young female, um, who learned the job very quickly and was able to just crank out these cases, I um I got a huge rush out of that. And it I just needed more of it. So 100%. And so there goes my, dysregulated nervous system right into outer space
Yeah.
and just
And
sent me
it's
into
so many
overdrive.
cops. Yours was doing the youth stuff and that, and the sex offenders. Then there's other people like myself, it was all about the tactical side of stuff. Like, I was like, "Okay, I want the tactical, cool, fast chases, stacking up on buildings, let's go, have fun," you know? Joined protection services, became a glorified I used to literally call myself a glorified bullet catch. You know? That's what my term for myself was. I'm a glorified bullet catch. My wife used to just shake her head and be like, "Don't say that, please." Because it was that thrill, that
Probably not something
adrenaline.
you want to hear as a spouse.
No, no, and but it is. It's so true. You know, we find something and it deals and it goes into things, and I'll come back to a question that I have on that later on. But so from there, you got commissioned, and then did you have to go straight to front like beats like I don't know, we call it like beat slash patrol. Did you have to go straight to that from academy?
No. So I went to the academy probably so I went to the academy when I was 20. And so I had a whole year before I was able to actually be properly commissioned.
Yeah.
And then when I signed on, I started like doing courthouse security, and then I did like prisoner transports, and then I got on FTO on the road, and we were pretty rural county. We had 520 square miles with some couple villages, like few villages and cities and whatever. But I mean, we were running with average of maybe 5 units, single man units. And I was on uh, primarily afternoon shift for the bulk of my career. So a lot of the in progress stuff. And that just, then I had a new love of just, getting hearing that domestic get called out. And I'm like, here I go. Like, yeah, lights and sirens. And not that I enjoyed, I mean, it really sounds sick, but not that I enjoyed hearing, domestic getting called out, but it was like, but knowing that I could be the person to get there and be of assistance, that then kind of
Yeah.
drove me.
So you could get there and be the change, be the difference, be the person for whatever was going on. Not can I mean that's why we join, isn't it? So we can go in. I hear it all the time, and I'm not a fan of this level of why somebody wants to join the police, but I want to, we all want to help people, and that's why
Yeah.
you and I have gotten into what we're doing now because it carries on from that, but at a deeper level. I guarantee it. Uh, so you did, normal frontline kind of work. And then where'd you go from there? Or is that where you stayed there till 2015?
That was my trajectory into my crispy burnout. So, um, I when I came I moved a couple hours away from my family for college. And so when I lived up here, I was pretty much alone. I had roommates, college roommates and stuff like that, but then I lived alone. And something I didn't mention, when I was 17, I lost my best friend since we were 4 years old to suicide. And um, so I had some other things happen in my childhood, but that was primarily like this big catalyst for me. And I really hadn't dealt with it.
Mm,
I was 17. I went through my senior year. I was completely numbed out. And then went, just a year or two later, I'm working in law enforcement. And so I just totally skated over it. Right. And by the time I got to 2015, I was isolating in certain ways, but then being social in destructive ways. Just going out partying, drinking too much, and bad decisions and whatever. Um, and then I started to see my job performance declining. I wasn't getting reports in on time. I was showing up to work without my duty weapon. I was like I wasn't getting sleep. And so I was having issues trying to stay awake on shift, and it was just bad. And I had enough awareness to say, I need to pump the brakes. And I had a few instances where things got really, really dark. And I said, I can't. Like, I need to make a choice, and I choose me.
mm. Was it your own awareness, or did anybody say anything to you? Was there any kind of sparks of words of what's going on in AK, like anything like that, or was it just kind of you recognized it?
Well, there was some awareness of the job performance for certain. And some of those things were brought to my attention in a not so great way,
Yeah,
which kind of perpetuated the issue.
yeah.
And I don't blame them. They didn't know what they didn't know. Um, a lot of it was my own self-awareness, but I do attribute being able to step away from starting a new relationship with my now husband and finally being able to say, okay, I do need some support and I do need to let somebody in and let somebody kind of be that safety net for me. And he was like, you don't have to live like this. And I was like, oh.
What do
And
you
so
think?
at
What do you
that
think?
point,
What
I
do you
was
think
like,
made you listen? What do you think made you listen to a new relationship?
oh gosh. Well, we had previously, so this is probably TMI for your listeners, but we went on a first date in like February of that year, and it was great. And I was like, I really like this guy, and I am gonna screw it up. So I ghosted him, and I told him, I said, I, the classic, it's not you, it's me. And, but but it was true. And I said, listen, I'm not in a good place. And, I want to revisit this, but I don't want you to, I don't want to string you along. Right. And, he waited for me and, oh, I'm gonna get emotional. Um, that summer, we saw each other again and he said, "You gonna let me take you on that second date?" And we had stayed in contact a little bit here and there. And I said, "Sure, what the hell?" And from that day on,
Mm,
we've been together.
right, man. Yeah. I'm so glad because who knows what would have happened from if if he hadn't. But no, that's an amazing story, and I'm glad that you did share that because it isn't TMI. It is so true with and you know it with all law enforcement or first responders. Sometimes we literally have to be slapped in the face to get we're excellent at looking after everybody else, but we just can't see anything in the mirror. It.
Well, and a lot of times we get these, and I've seen it called, they're ants, automatic negative thoughts, and we get these automatic negative thoughts that, um, you know, this person's going to ghost me or this person's not going to like me or I'm going to screw this up because that's what I do. And so we really have to have somebody prove us wrong.
Mm,
And he was persistent and he stuck around and he proved to me that he wasn't going to leave.
yeah.
And that was like, okay, so maybe whatever I've been doing isn't working and I need to try this other thing. So yeah,
You
and we're
don't have
quick
to
to
answer
isolate,
this.
so
You don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but curious, did you have people leave you when you were a kid?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And that's and so and yeah, our conversation earlier, a lot of what our issues are as adults stem from what our issues were as children that we never dealt
Yeah.
with. And so for me, abandonment is
Yeah.
a whole thing. It is a whole can of worms with alligators and scorpions and all the icky creatures
Sharks
you
with
can think
laser
of.
beams and
Oh yes.
all of
Yes.
it.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. Mine's am I good enough? That's been mine for years. It
Mhm.
still is there and it drives me and it rears its head at times. But it is. It's so true. And we bring that into policing. And it's great to have that, yeah, this is why you and I do what we do, is because it's about bringing that awareness that it's not that you're not bringing it in, but you're not bringing the destructive part of it into policing.
Right. Right.
Okay, so perfect. So I love it. So you brought that awareness. What'd you do to fight that burnout, and what do you still use today from those times?
Well, so that was the start of diving back into yoga because I started doing yoga when I was in the academy, but just for like a good stretch.
Yeah.
Um, didn't really understand all the other parts of it. Um, but that was my kind of segue back into all of the woo woo things. And so what I really learned, I started digging a lot into trauma and neurobiology and how your nervous system gets dysregulated when you experience chronic stress and trauma, and how to get all of that back online, how to get the proper parts of your brain working again, how to reframe your ways of thinking and refile those memories. And um, so a lot of it was for me, going through yoga teacher training and starting a meditation practice, and really just getting to know myself, coming home to me, because I didn't know who I was. And and I know that again, this is something we've talked about because it is so prevalent. And the I'll say the king of trauma, Bessel van der Kolk, says the essence of trauma is the loss of identity. And so when we're growing up and we don't feel like we have an identity, or we don't like our identity, or we just feel lost, we're going to go towards something that gives us an immediate, recognizable sense of identity, a uniform. And if we grew up not feeling seen and not feeling heard, damn it, I'm going to have lights and sirens, and you're going to see me and you're going to hear me.
Yep. And a big
And
ass horn.
that is yes, exactly. And that drives so many first responders into these fields. And a lot of us don't like to admit it because we're so good at avoiding that stuff. Um, but when you really boil it down, that's that's a lot of why we even get into this stuff. But
Yep.
then we have to work through that to be able to prevent the burnout. And so, we can talk all we want about making sure we get enough sleep and eating properly and exercising. All those things are great.
Yeah.
Those are amazing peripheral things that need to be in place. But if you don't know who you are, and if you're not healing those old wounds, you're still going to burn out.
Mhm. Have you had a look at, I did this a while back when I was creating some stuff for a presentation, and I don't know why I hadn't done it sooner, but have you had a look at the Webster Dictionary definition of burnout and PTSD?
Not recently.
Yeah,
So I don't, I mean,
it changes,
at
doesn't
some,
it? Yeah.
well, but at some point I did, but
Yeah.
I don't, it's not,
Yeah.
I
So
didn't commit it
I
to
can't
memory.
quote it off exactly, but it's the gist of it around it is burnout is a cumulative um accumulation of stressors that causes a lack of like a reduction in energy or something along those lines. So it's
Mhm.
an accumulation of stressors is the big thing that I picked out of it. PTSD is depression, anxiety, or a mental illness caused by a singular stressful event.
Hmm.
And now we know there's a cumulative PTSD.
Right. Complex PTSD. Yeah.
Very similar, aren't they? So when
Well,
when you look at it from a word definition, logical point of view, if we're burning out and we haven't dealt with our trauma, like you said, we're going to have that, we're going to get, we're going to burn out because we haven't dealt with our past stuff. How much more likely are we to have those PTSD events actually lock in? Because all we're doing is adding more and more stress to our lives being in the state of burnout. And then when those big ones come in, like that death, that suicide, that a notification job, the thing that overwhelms us, all of a sudden we just fall over and spiral and
yeah.
spiral and spiral. And so this is where I'm glad that you brought that all up around the whole thing of dealing with your past trauma so you really know who you are and bring
Mhm.
yourself to it, and then put the badge and gun and everything else on top, there to help who you are.
Right.
Then we don't
Well,
end up.
and even if you, yeah, and even if you do know who you are you living that way?
Yes.
How many of us are walking around wearing a completely different mask on the outside from what we truly are on the inside? And how exhausting is that? I mean, you talk about chronic stress, right? And so my big thing, or the thing I talk to my clients a lot about, is making sure that you're able to kind of break yourself free from all of that inauthenticity. And it's not that you have to share all of your things all the time, but to be able to own it and acknowledge it and say, yep, this is me, and actually navigate through it. That's what kind of sets you free and breaks down that barrier, because then you can just walk into a room and be like, "Hey, I'm here." Not, "Who's in the room? What face do I need to put on? And what am I supposed to say and not allowed to say?" So, I mean, it really, that right there just takes a lot of stress off.
Oh, definitely. And it's also I believe, I'd love to know your thoughts on it, with us being on very similar pages. Once you know the why or where it comes from, like that why you have that mask on, then when that mask decides and it tries to put itself back on, you can go, "Oh, okay, this is coming back up again, and this is why it's coming
Mhm.
up. Okay, cool. Now I get to make a decision on it. Do I put the mask on to save to make myself feel safe, or do I take it off and actually work through it so that I'm safe all the time?"
Yeah. And then just having that awareness.
Hmm.
So exactly when it comes up, when you feel, and I hate to use the word triggered, but I haven't found a better one for it yet. But when you feel triggered, or you feel like you need to revert back, that's where the rubber meets the road. That's where all of that work that you've done can actually be applied, because a lot of people are like, "Well, wait, but you I do this work, but how do I actually implement it?" Well, it's gonna life is gonna give you opportunities. Um, but then in that process, once you have the big awareness, you can't then shame yourself back into your hole because you you did the old thing, or because you're not where you want to be, because that will just perpetuate you right back into where you were.
Yeah, no, it's so so true. So what? So you did the yoga, you went the woo woo way, which I know
Sure did.
we all the pendulum tends to swing, and we're seeing that in law enforcement right now. For all those out there, we do feel for you. The pendulum is swinging to the every cop needs to be, what, all the whatever you want to call it. Anyways, you know what I'm talking about, and all those out there know what I'm talking about. The pendulum is swung. I mean, if you look at it that way, it will come back. When something swings, and what is it? If it goes up, it must come down. It's gonna come back, and it
Hmm.
will balance out. Um, so you went the woo woo with the yoga, and then you've come back to the your lifesaver wellness business
Hmm.
that you have now.
Yep.
How do you balance? Where's the pendulum landed?
So I have a very practical approach in my teaching. So I have my woo woo ways for me, but I know that that's not for everybody. And so when I go into these departments and do a training, or I'm working one on one with a client, or even I just built out a self paced program that's on my new app, Lifesaver Academy app. So anytime I'm implementing that stuff or sharing that, I have a very practical approach, and it's all just about being real and actually acknowledging what's going on. So being able to connect, mind and body. And there's a lot of like breathing exercises. You don't need to stand on your head and do yoga. And, if you want to, by all means, it helps. Um, but there's a lot of other things that just can help you connect to yourself. And in doing that, a lot of it can sound very soft, and I get that all the time. And my my rebuttal to that is, when a storm is on the horizon, a cow will turn and try to outrun the storm and ends up being in the storm for a lot longer. Cows are dumb and they're slow. Buffalo and bison will face the storm head on and charge into that storm. And when they do that, they reduce the amount of time that they're in it, they reduce the amount of discomfort, and they just freaking deal with it. And so often as first responders, we are the bison. We go straight into the danger. We handle our shit, we get in, we get out. But when it comes to our personal wellness and our emotions and our mental health, we're over here trying to be the cow, like just
I
no.
just have
And
images.
it,
It's so
oh,
true
right.
though. We're so good at looking after everybody else. And I've interviewed hundreds of first responders, and it's we're great at saving everybody else and doing evals
Yeah.
on everybody else. But when it comes to ourselves, oh no, there's nothing wrong with
Mhm.
me. I'll just sit here and I'll be fine. Everything will be all good. And I remember saying that exact
Yes.
thing when I joined the police.
Yeah. And so we're like, oh, I'm just gonna, and then I'm the black cloud, and I'm gonna bitch about it, but I'm not gonna actually do anything about it.
Yeah.
Whereas if you would have that bison mentality and say, all right, my body's revved up, I'm feeling anxious, and nothing's happening. I'm just sitting in my living room. Maybe I need to explore this,
Hmm.
right? But no. So that's where I try to, and I try to give those visuals because that helps,
Yeah.
but it really is, it's not a soft way of dealing with things. It's not a, and I'll just say it, woman's way of dealing with emotions, because we all have them. Um, it really is kind of badass to just face your stuff and hit it head
It's
on. Um,
I bet you won't disagree with me. It's not easy either. But like you said,
no,
you'll be in it for less time if you hit it hard on the head. Yeah, yeah.
it's not easy, but the part that we have to overcome is the stigma
Mm,
and the knowing that there's pain there,
yeah.
because your brain doesn't know the difference between physical and emotional pain. And your brain's going, no, ma'am, we're going to be the heifer today. I'm going this way. I don't want to be the bison
Yeah.
because there's pain there. But if we just, take some deep breaths, huff and puff a little bit, join the stampede and go, then there's a whole lot of freedom on the other side of that.
A whole lot. And it gets easier. Like I was actually thinking this
Yeah.
exact thing the other day because with me taking the next step in my business and really putting myself out there for departments and things like that, these old fears are coming up in different ways, and these old things are coming up, and I was sitting there and I was riding my motorcycle to town, and I was like, why does this keep coming up? And I was like, I was working through, I was like, I remember when these first started coming, and I would fight against them and be like, not go away. And now I'm sitting there going, why is this coming up? And being the bison, literally hitting the
Mhm.
hammer right on the head, just going, let's go. Okay, cool. What's going on? And I remember I used to, when somebody would ask me, or my wife would ask me, deep questions, and I'd be like, no, I'm not going there. And even still, it still comes up. It's like, no, I don't want to go there. No, okay, let's go, because this is how you get through it quickly. Otherwise, it's going to be here in a month or 2 months or 3 months, still here, and I'm not going to be any further ahead. So, couldn't agree with you more there. Um, okay, so um, I do have a question for you, because I get this one all the time when I see it, and in a way, it annoys the crap out of me because I conquered this so long ago. What do you say to those officers that have to sit with their back? They have to sit facing the door and their back to the wall. And with that smile, you know what I'm talking about.
I sure do. I would ask them how their dinner is. No, you know what? That is a habit that I have a hard time breaking.
Interesting.
And it's a little bit of, so here, I'll say this. It used to be out of extreme hypervigilance,
Yeah, which
right?
is most cases. I feel is that's where people are sitting.
And now it's, I don't have to. I
Mm,
don't have to have my back, or have my eyes on the door. Um, I feel a little bit better when I do, just for safety's sake. But for example, if I'm meeting up with a client and I know they have that,
Yeah.
I will give them the door. I will let them,
Yeah.
and I feel safe with them. Um,
How about
it's
with your spouse?
what's that?
How about with your husband?
Um, I mean, he's not in law enforcement, but I
No.
feel safe with him, so I don't think like I don't. It doesn't become a thing when it's just him and I don't think.
Why is anything? Because I know a lot of people, a lot of ex police that I talk to are like, if I can't sit with my face facing the door, I won't go in. And
So
then
it's not as
they're
much
even with their spouse or anything, they're like, I have to be able to see.
so it's not as much of a thing for me now because I have a regulated nervous system. Because I am not completely hypervigilant anymore. I am not, on my toes with pins and needles and just ready for the next thing to happen. Like I'm ready and I'm prepared, but I'm also very grounded
Yeah.
now. And before I was, I probably couldn't even tell you where my feet were. So, that's the difference now. That used to be the case 100%, but
Would you say now that you're grounded and that you aren't as hyper vigilant, would you say that uh, you use when your back is to the door that you use your other senses more? That they actually have a tendency to come in more?
yes.
Which I feel is a bonus that we have. Like I'm the same way. I
Oh
never
yeah.
really got to the thing of I have to watch the door. It never got planted with me. I just always used all my senses. I was hyper vigilant. I mean, I was looking after the heads of state and things like that. And so off duty, I was still in that same zone. So hyper vigilant that I was in the U.S. and driving my uncle's pickup, driving my uncle's truck and to a friend's house and thought that somebody was following me. Black 2000 Tahoe, so much so that I pulled over and forced it to pass me. That's how hyper
Mhm.
vigilant I got to. But I would always use my senses, and so now that's all I use those senses. So I was just curious to see if that's what you find you use now that you're a bit more grounded and you're able to do that.
And it's interesting because so you mentioned that, and I would say when I was very close to my burnout, I lived about 5 minutes away from my department. My commute was maybe 7 minutes, and I would take a different route almost every night home. I would drive 15 minutes to get home just because I thought maybe somebody was following me, right? And
Did
that's
you ever
not
have
like
anyone?
I don't mean to not that I'm aware of. And I don't mean to say that in a mocking way. I'm kind of mocking myself, but
Yeah.
because that hypervigilance plays tricks on your cognition. It plays tricks on you and you start to pick up on things and question things that maybe are not completely grounded in reality. And that's where it starts to get kind of scary, um, because you think there's somebody following you and you're like, nope, they're just in a hurry and they were tailgating me. So
And
but
have you
yeah,
done any
I
surveillance work?
definitely,
Have you done any surveillance work?
yeah.
Yeah. So once you've done surveillance work, you actually realize that if somebody's properly following you home and knows what they're actually doing, you're
Oh yeah,
probably not even
you're not
gonna
even gonna
know that they're
notice.
there.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And that's,
And if they don't know what they're
but you're
doing,
not.
you can probably handle them when they if you pull in, you'll probably be able to handle them anyways.
But if you're completely hypervigilant and you're not
Exactly.
grounded in reality, you're not you're not going to think clearly.
You're not gonna
And
second guess the thought. Yeah.
yeah,
So what
and
would you
that's
say is a
why
oh sorry, go ahead. Sorry for interrupting.
well, I was just going to say that's why it's so important to be able to regulate yourself and get grounded so that, you know, your mind isn't playing tricks on you.
So I know for like, I've talked to lots of people and I've been out of, full-time law enforcement for quite a while now. And so, in my mind, I sit there and I go, okay, cool. Well, somebody who's in law enforcement that is maybe in that kind of hyper vigilant kind of thing is, might be saying in their head, yeah, this is easy for you to say you're not active. You're not dealing
Hmm.
with the bottom 2% of society every single day. You're not all these things. What would be your response to that?
I was active for quite a while. I was in it. I was deep in it. Um, and s okay, so now I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
Um,
what I'm saying is that, we're not in it anymore. So yeah, it's easy for us to do all these
so
things,
n
but yeah.
so now I'm grounded because I'm
Yeah.
out of it.
Yeah.
I would say talk to some of my clients
Yeah.
who are still in it,
Yeah.
and I've coached them through, getting grounded and using these tools and using these methods and using these techniques, and, um not only just my clients, there's a ton of people using these techniques. There's a whole police department in uh Arizona, and I can't remember exactly where at this point, but um that uses meditation and mindfulness as a tactical tool
Mm.
to stay grounded in the moment. It actually makes you more tactically sound because you're more aware of your surroundings. And so there's a lot of science out there. There's a lot of studies out there on mindfulness, on um, just nervous system stuff, on PTS, on hypervigilance, and all of those things that can easily show you that the results are there.
Mm. Cool. Totally agree. Would have said it. Same exact thing. But I didn't realize about I know that there's lots of different departments using yoga and meditation and that, but it's cool to hear that one's like specifically hardcore using that, because that's real good. It makes us, it makes the police and that are still out there, it makes all of us, like you said, more have a better tactical advantage, because you don't get that red haze, you don't get that tunnel vision as much. Remember, they used to always say, take a deep breath if you find yourself getting into that tunnel vision. It's like, well, I don't know I'm in the tunnel vision when I'm in it. It's,
Right, right.
I don't realize it until afterwards that I went, oh, there was a guy over here that I didn't even see. When you're doing scenarios. So yeah, no, that's awesome. AK, what would you say for, if somebody was going to do maybe one or two things and they're going to start implementing them right now, besides everything that they've learned so far, one or two things, what would you say would be the top one or two things that you would say start doing today, and how would they do it?
Breathing techniques, um, because it's an instant effect, and they get your mind and body connected. You can get yourself grounded. So tactical breathing, box breathing, but making sure that it's a good, proper three-part breath. Um, and starting to dive into
Mm.
who you are at the core of your identity, not who you are as an officer, who you are as a spouse, as a parent, as a son or daughter, but who are you when all of those labels come off? And not even just who you are, but who do you want to be? Because you can literally declare who you want to be. You can say, okay, I'm actually not a hillbilly. I am an emo person. I don't know. I'm just making up examples. But you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you have these expectations like, well, society wants me to be X, Y, and Z. And you're like, well, no, I'm A, B, and C, and I want to be that. Then be that.
Mm.
Then live the way you want to live. Be authentic to you and not what society expects of you. So just finding or declaring your own identity and breathing techniques, getting yourself grounded in the moment.
I love it. I love it. So my philosophy and thought is that our identity is a lot tied up into our why and our purpose. And I believe it comes back to when
Mhm.
we were very young, that pre-7, when we were all kind of developing and learning everything, and where a lot of our trauma comes from as well. Uh, my why comes from, and knowing where it comes from, as we said, is real important, but also what it is. My why comes from my dad going to chiropractic school when I was like 3. So that's where it stems from. And it is, I want to, like, I've changed mine into a mission statement. I help myself and others truly see ourselves. And so it's
Mhm.
all about, my why was to be seen all the time, i.e., becoming a cop, like you had said. When you said about the lights and sirens, I was like, yep, there you go. Lights, sirens, tactical gear, cool, perfect, awesome. So what would you say, AK, your why is and where it came from?
Oh. Mhm. I don't know if I can pinpoint one specific uh instance. I mean, I think I have multiple, and they probably all get wrapped up into one, but my biggest thing is to make sure that people know that they don't have to suffer,
Mm. Did you feel like you
and
suffered when you were a kid?
have you don't have to suffer, and you don't have to suffer in silence.
No.
I think people think, that, and we are, honestly, our brains are hardwired for suffering because our brains hold on to the bad things that happen to try to prevent them in the future. Our brains aren't designed to make us happy, but you can shift that around and be able to find happiness and joy in your life despite that.
Mm.
And so, I don't know, maybe I'll go with that one for now.
Yeah, cool.
You've given me something else to dive deeper into, so I like
Well,
it.
if you need help with it, that is what that's my specialty. So, happy to help out there. Because yeah, it does it changes everything, and the feedback that I get from my clients is literally they're like, "Holy crap, I actually know who I am and what drives me now. Now I can make sure." And some of them are like, "Actually, now that I know this, policing's not it. I don't need to do policing now." Some of them
Isn't
were
that
like, "It's
funny? I've
definitely
had that.
policing." Yeah, it's definitely policing that I need to do because this holy crap. Like I had one client just recently. It was like, "Oh, I don't know if I should go military or police." And I was like, "Cool. What is your why and mission statement?" He told me. He's like, I was like, "Okay, cool." And then we've played it out. What serves you, what doesn't on either one. And instantly it was like, "Nah, it's policing." And instantly the military was gone. He's like, "Nope, not it, don't need it anymore." He's like, "Policing totally it." And there's nothing else that I know of right now. I was like, "Cool, perfect." And once you're like, "Hey, this isn't it anymore," then you can actually clearly go, "Okay, this is it." And so yeah, no, it's pretty cool. Okay, because you do really cool stuff. Yes, we do similar stuff, but you do it in your way. And we were talking about this before that there's so many of us out there, and we need all of us. So if somebody wants to get in touch with you and wants to learn about the way that you do things to help them really be the best officer they can be, and really thrive, and not burn out or get those crispy moments like we've both had, how do they get in touch with you?
The easiest way is to go to lifesaverwellness.com. All my socials are linked up there. There's forms to fill out if you want to speak with me or have me come speak at a conference, or apply to work with me one on one, or on the self-paced program. So lifesaverwellness.com, that's the easiest way.
Cool, perfect. We'll put that down below. I'll even go grab your socials and drop them in the links down below in the description. Uh, Last thing I like to ask, AK, is what would you say your top tip to self happiness is?
Self-love. Being able to actually extend love to yourself and give yourself the opportunity to open yourself to receiving love. And I think that second part is the part that we don't address enough. Um, like, oh yeah, I do self-care and self-love and all this, but then do you really open yourself up for it to boomerang to you actually allowing yourself to receive it
Hmm.
and giving yourself enough grace to say, I'm human, and I don't need to hold my mistakes against me all the time, and I don't need to continue to shame myself or listen to the naysayers or whatever, but to truly love yourself is quite a feat. But when you can get there, that's where your life just opens up.
Couldn't agree more. Any last words that you have, AK, before we wrap up?
Nothing profound that's coming to mind, but other than thank you. This has been awesome. This was a great conversation. I could definitely see this I could definitely see this going for like 6 more hours, but
We could do a whole Joe Rogan on this and go for like 3 or 4
oh
hours
god.
having a drink and talking about all these different things. But we won't do that to the listeners and viewers. Not okay. Thank you very much for taking your time, and spending it with us and giving us all your little, as I call them, nuggets, to help each other out, and to help ourselves out, because you can't learn enough of this stuff, because a lot of it comes in and goes out, and we'll pick up on little things. And that's why we do these podcasts, is because our first responders out there have it hard enough. We may as well give them the stuff that can help them be the best that they can be and impact everybody out there. We aren't doing it anymore. So I want to thank all of you first responders out there for looking after us still. And you are cared, you are cherished. And if you need any assistance from AK, go to her website, Lifesaver. And if you are wanting to get in touch with me at all in any way, I'm always available. My links are all down in the description as well. But you just have to email me, Chris at knockingdemoncoaching.com. And there's a story behind that one. You will have heard it in another episode, but Chris at knockingdemoncoaching.com. And we will help you out. And we look forward to possibly seeing you on that motorcycle retreat. Till next time, thank you very much. And train hard, test easy.